Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2021 Ford F-450, we're going to be showing you how to install the Airlift Easy Mount WirelessONE air compressor system. But before we do that, why don't we check it out and make sure that this kit's going to work for you. Probably one of the coolest things about this particular setup is the fact that it is wireless. And I know that can concern some people thinking that it might not be reliable, but today's day and age, I got it figured out. You know, these things work. I've had a lot of good luck with them, and really nothing to worry about there as far as that goes, at least in my opinion. But the cool thing is, you know, you're able to actually adjust the bags from outside of the truck if you wanted to. So if you got your trailer hooked up and you notice it's squatting a little bit more than you'd like, or it's, you know, too much air in the bags, you can control them from here, take a look at it, and make your adjustments, as opposed to kind of doing things the old school way, where you'd have to manually fill the bags or let air out of them, or even the other compressor systems that will shoot air into the bags, but you have to go in there and manually operate them. So you go inside the truck and hold the switch and check the pressure, come back out, look and see what's going on. So something like this really just speeds that process up. And it's the little things in life, you know, that just make things a little bit easier and save you a bit of time. Even though we have our compressor system hooked up now, the fact that it uses T-fittings to connect into our original Air Bag air lines, you're actually still able to maintain and use the manual inflation valves if you want to. You know, if you're anything like me, it's always good to kind of have a backup and a couple different ways to do things. And so that's exactly why I set ours up today. So worst case scenario, if something does happen, you know, whatever the case may be, you definitely always have that option still to come back and adjust the bags using the traditional type manual inflation valves. There is something that I do want to address, and I feel like this is really important because we see it all the time, and that has to do with the traditional type air compressors, the ones that have an analog gauge and you manually inflate it. Those work fine and everything. I'm not opposed to them when they can be used, but the problem is with just about every late model truck nowadays, and this one's really no exception, where are you gonna put it? Because the gauge assembly and the switches and everything, they're pretty big and they take up quite a bit of space, more than you would think. And there's so much stuff going on the dash now with these new trucks. You got screens and 100 buttons and all this stuff happening. There's just no real good spot to put it. I feel like with these wireless ones, it's really a good option in terms of keeping everything clean and functional, and not drilling holes into your truck's dash and everything else. I do just want to cover some of the features that the remote has. So you can see that's how you adjust the bags, and you know, having it set up like this will go down at the same rate or go up at the same rate. You can adjust side to side. So for example, you know, if you wanted the driver's side for whatever reason to have more air in it, you could always set it up like that. Chances are pretty good most people aren't going to do that. You might have a once in a while off center load to where you need to make that adjustment. But, you know, I'd probably never use it. I'd probably just adjust the bags at the same time. But at least you have the option. And another thing that you can use this for is onboard air systems. So say for example, if you wanted to sacrifice the side-to-side adjustment, the individual bag adjustment, and you're okay with just having your adjusting both bags at the same rate, you could always use one of the paths to go to an air tank and have onboard air. If that's what you're wanting to do, I know a lot of people like to have that option. So if you're wondering that, yes, this compressor system will work with the onboard air setup. But keep in mind, you're going to lose that individual bag adjustment. With that said, the compressor system is going to go up to 100 psi. So essentially any type of bag setup, I mean, that's going to be more than enough, and you know, you'll be covered. Generally speaking, you really don't see anyone even getting close to that, but that's what the compressor can handle. And especially if you do have the onboard air, want to set that up, you have 100 psi, and that's enough to fill up a tire or anything along those lines. I mean, when it comes down to it, if you're looking for an air compressor system for your truck, I mean, I'd strongly consider this one. Honestly, out of the compressor systems on the market that we carry here at eTrailer, this one's definitely my favorite. I know a lot of the other guys in the shop too, it's their favorite. Just how responsive it is, and yet to run into any communication errors or anything like that, being wireless. It just works, you know, it really does work, and they bundle everything together for you. It's just really streamlined, and not a whole lot to it. But with that said, why don't we go ahead now, we'll pull into the shop, I'll show you guys a couple more things, and then we can check out and move on to the installation side. Is the compressor going to work with different brands or manufacturers of airbags? And the answer is yes. Perfect example today, we have Firestone airbags on our truck. Compressor don't care what brand the airbag is. It's got one job, to pump air into them. And so regardless on, you know, if you have airlift airbags, great. The compressor will work with those. Firestone airbags, it'll work with those, or even other manufacturers. You know, you're going to be able to hook up to it and fill the bags up full of air. One of the things that really helps separate this kit from a lot of the other ones available is how easy it's going to be to install. I've done a ton of kits, and by far this one's my favorite. Not only how it works and everything else, but install wise too, it's about as simple as it gets. And that's partly due to the fact that everything's contained in one big assembly. So you have your compressor, your manifold, all the wiring and everything is already, you know, essentially taped up and set up for you to just put onto your truck. And so it really streamlines the process and makes it much more simple compared to some of the other ones where you kind of have to do all these little bits on your own, mount up these multiple components. So having it all contained in one unit really speeds things up. So as long as you stay focused, it really shouldn't give you too many issues getting it installed. But speaking of that, why don't we go ahead and set this up together now. To begin our installation, first thing we're going to do is mount up our compressor assembly. And so we're going to be working, in our case, on the passenger side of our truck, right here where the cab actually meets the bed. So here's our assembly mounted up, and this actually worked out really good. The kit does come with some self-tapping screws, some regular bolts, and a U-bracket, which I prefer to try to use that no-drill U-bracket. It works really well, but the frame on the 450 is just too big for it to fit around. So I'm not particularly fond of drilling holes into the actual frame and using them self-tapping screws. So what I opted for, there's this gusset, I guess you'd call it here, just this little piece of bracket that comes off of the frame. And I took our compressor assembly, slid it up next to it, and then there was a hole already in here in the factory bracket. So I held this up, marked it, drilled the hole out in the compressor bracket, and then just drilled out this bolt hole entirely and used our bolts, flat washers, and nylon lock nuts, tightened it down, and this thing is on there really good, definitely not going anywhere. Now what we're able to do is set up our air filter, and what you're going to do is take the filter, there's a barbed fitting that comes with the kit, and you just simply thread that on. You don't have to use a wrench or anything, just get it hand tight. And you're going to have a small portion of tubing. It's kind of the more rubbery than the other tubing that comes with it, comes with the kit. But take one end, push that onto the barbed fitting. Then what I'm going to do is figure out where we want to mount this. Usually I try to look for a hole that's in the body or in the frame or on a bracket that this will just clip into. That way we don't have to drill. Sometimes you can find it, sometimes you can't. But I'm going to find a spot to mount this, and then what we're able to do is route the tube to the top of our compressor. And on the top of the compressor there's going to be another barbed fitting just like this, and it's just going to push right onto it. So I'll go ahead and find a spot and show you what I came up with. So I got our air filter mounted. Right here there's this flange, and I couldn't really find a good spot that had a factory hole where this would just pop in, so I drilled a 3/8 hole, simply just push the air cleaner down into it to secure it, And when you mount that, you want to, you know, try to get it somewhere where it's going to be high and dry. So I feel like this is a really good spot, you know, so water ain't splashing up on it and everything else. But our tube comes off of it. Our airline tube just runs over to the compressor, and like we talked about before, on top of the compressor there will be a barbed fitting, and this tube just simply slides right on top of it. So at this point we can take our wiring harness. One end is going to have this connector on it. That's just going to plug right in like that, and this will eventually get ran up into the engine compartment, which we'll get to in a minute. But if you look off of our harness, we're going to have a red and a black wire. And I already started to get this one set up, but it'll all be the same. Every connection that we make we'll use the same method essentially. But if you look at the wires coming off of the compressor itself, it's going to have a ring terminal and a spade terminal. We're going to get rid of those. We'll cut them off. And what we want to do is strip back the insulation. And I'm probably going to double these over because the butt connectors that comes with it are pretty big. This is relatively thin wired. Actually, once I got it twisted now, it looks like we won't have to. So I'll twist these wires. And then we're going to do to this black wire what we did to this red one here. You're going to strip it back. Take the butt connector, slide it over. Crimp it down. Then we're just going to go color for color here. So crimp it down. And since these are heat shrinks, come back with a heat gun and seal up the ends. So I went ahead, just taped up our connections that we made a moment ago. Kind of zip tied everything up out of the way. And then you can route the wires up into the engine compartment. So thankfully it's pretty straightforward on this truck. There's some factory wires that essentially just run down the whole length of the frame. If you decide to take a different route, make sure to avoid any hotter moving parts and use the zip ties every now and again just to keep everything secure. Let's just get a run up front. And then if I'm going to peel our wheel well liner back, hopefully we'll be able to see the wires just go right up into the engine compartment. Here's where our wires come up. You're going to have a black wire, a red wire, and a pink wire. We'll focus on the black and red wire first. So black one is just a ground. So you strip the wire back, crimp on ring terminal, and we're going to hook that up to the negative battery post. So I'm going to remove that nut using a 10mm socket. You can then slide on the ring terminal. Once I have this done, we can move on to the positive side. The red wire is going to get connected to the positive battery terminal, so I just routed our wire over this way. And they give you a fuse holder with the kit, so I connected one end of it to our red wire using the heat shrink butt connector. The other end, crimped on a ring terminal. Make sure the fuse is not installed. We're going to do that at the very end, once everything is hooked up and whatnot. So same deal with this one over here. Going to remove the nut using a 10mm. Slide our ring terminal over it and just tighten it back down. As far as the pink wire goes, this one's going to have to get connected to a fuse that has power only when the key is on. And I found a fuse, and we'll get to that in just a moment, but I kind of preset it up. So the kit will come with a way to tap into there and a separate fuse holder and whatnot. In my opinion, it's not the greatest. I mean, it'll work, but I definitely suggest using something like this, a fuse tap. Just a lot more reliable and works a lot better, at least in my opinion. When you do these though, the bottom slot, that's where the factory fuse is going to go, the one that you're using to tap into. And then the new fuse for our compressor will go up top. And when you plug this in, so if you pull a fuse out of the fuse box, one side's going to have power, the other side's not. And obviously when the fuse is in there, it completes that circuit. When we put this in, you want to make sure that this prong is going to the hot side of our fuse box. That way the power comes up and actually goes through the fuse, and it'll work the way it should. So with that in mind, why don't we go ahead, just take a quick peek at the fuse block and show you what one we use and kind of what we got going on. So just due to limited space, I went ahead and plugged in our fuse tap. I took the 3-amp fuse that comes with the kit, plugged it in to the fuse tap, and then into the fuse block. So the fuse that I used was number 6 for the snowplow, and worked out really well. Was able to plug that right in, and that's going to help provide an ignition source for our air compressor. Now moving back to our compressor, we can start to run our air lines. So I took the bundle of air line and essentially cut it in half and started to kind of tape them together. That way we can run both lines at once and not have to do it twice. On one of the lines, every now and again, I would put a little bit of yellow paint there just to help, keep track of what line goes where, which I definitely suggest doing. And now we can plug these in, but before you plug them in, any of these quick connect fittings that we're gonna do, you wanna make sure that the cut is clean and straight. So you wanna use a tool like this, or even a regular utility knife. There's tubing cutters. You don't wanna use a regular pair of snips because it'll kink it and potentially create a leak. So these, you want it to be smooth, straight, don't want any burrs or anything like that on it. So that's a good example of how it should look. So now what we can do is go ahead and get these plugged into the compressor. If you look at the bottom of your compressor, we're gonna have 2 quick connect air fittings. And this one, that's gonna be for the left side or the driver's side of a vehicle. And then obviously this one will be the right or passenger side. So to keep things organized, on the left side, I put a yellow dot there, and I'm gonna use my yellow hose, the one I marked with yellow, for that one. And that way we get the sides right. But with these, simply just push it in, you'll feel it kind of click into place. And that's really all there is to it. So now that I have both of them plugged in here, I'm gonna start to route these towards the back, where our existing air bags and air lines are, and that's where we can tee them in. They come out of the compressor, we run up, and just come along through here, and then at this point they start to kind of shoot diagonally over towards the driver's side of the truck. So we'll go underneath and get a better look at them. Once they go right over the frame, just run along up through here, and again, make sure to avoid any high removing parts when you're doing this. They run along our fuel tank and continue along towards the back. So there's our airline again, and eventually comes over to the the driver's side of our frame, where there's some factory wiring here, and I just followed that path right along towards the back. And this is where we have them teed in to our existing airlines from our airbags. So essentially all you're gonna do is cut the existing line in half like we talked about. Make sure they're clean, take the included tee, quick connect it in, so they just push right in, and then the airline that we ran is gonna get plugged into there. So again, this is why I marked them. So with this one being all black, we know it's for the right side. With the other one having the yellow dot, we know that is for the left side. So I just did it accordingly, and that'll allow us to tap into our current airlines. Something that I do want to mention, before you actually cut into your original airlines, make sure that you let all the air out. You don't want to cut it and have 50 pounds of air in it and it go wild on you. So drain the air, and if your airbags do not have internal Johnson bumpers, or they're not designed to have no air pressure at all in them, you definitely want to support them. So ours weren't like that. So before I let the air out, I made sure to take a jack and just apply a little bit of pressure up here. That way the airbags will kind of have some support and not the whole weight of the truck on them. If your setup's like that and you're at home, obviously a floor jack will do the same thing, just to give it some support until we get air into the system again. So I'm just gonna manually inflate them, get some air in them. That way I can get rid of our pull jack, and while we're under here, this will be a good opportunity as well to check for any leaks or any issues with our connections. A couple of ways you can check for leaks. One of them being by sound. If the leak's bad enough, you'll know pretty much right away. You'll hear it hissing at you. But sometimes you can have a small leak and not really hear it. So what you can do, and what I did, is spray all the connections that we made down with soapy water. And what we're looking for is for bubbles to continuously and rapidly form around there. And if we see that, we know we have a small leak. In our case, I sprayed them down, gave them a couple minutes. It looks like we're solid. But if you did have a leak, what you do is kind of go through the process again, let the air out, disconnect the air line. With these, you kind of just push in and then pull out on them. That'll disconnect them. Recut it, plug it back in, fill it up, and check it again. But we're good back here, so we're more or less ready to roll. I'll check the ones at the compressor itself, and as long as those are good, we can pop our fuse in and power everything up. So back under the hood, you want to have a remote and the battery that comes with it ready, as well as the fuse for our fuse holder. And what we want to do first is put this battery in, and then, all right, so our thing says pairing, it's trying to scan. So we should be able to put the fuse in, and it should eventually communicate with it, which it is. So we can hear our compressor letting air out. So it says wireless air compressor, that's us. We'll connect to it. Paired successful. And that's what it's doing now. So it's preset at 5 pounds air. We obviously had more than that in it, so it's letting all the air out. So we know it's communicating. And now we can play with this a little bit to just make sure everything's working right and set up how we want it to. Just to do a quick check, we heard it letting all the air out to the settings. So now I'm gonna see if it'll pump air up. So increase the pressure a little bit. Compressor fired up pretty much immediately and is going up to the desired air pressure. So I think it's safe to say we're in pretty good shape. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Airlift Easy Mount WirelessONE air compressor system on our 2021 Ford F-450.